There's one training principle that revolutionized endurance training and training in general. And that was the principle come up by Bill Bowerman, University of Oregon track coach, who figured out the hard easy principle. What was it? It's rather simple. You alternate going hard and easy. Hard day, easy day. Now, I know this doesn't seem mind-blowing now, but if we trace the history and if we look at what people, including health and performance influencers, are suggesting now, a lot of people have forgotten this principle. And then more so, we haven't realized the nuance that we now know 60 plus years later from when Bowerman introduced it. So we're going to go through all of that today. So first I want to start with people are thinking, do people really not follow hard and easy now? Unfortunately, that's the case. If you spend way too much time looking at training programs, both from athletes and more so from health podcasters, influencers, etc., you'll be surprised how many people you find violate this simple rule that Bowerman discovered 60 years ago. For instance, one program that I was looking at today, well-known health person, had them go 3 days in a row of hard intervals, hard tempo, hard fartlek. Now, the varying degrees of hard were there, but still that's 3 days in a row of hard workouts followed by many days of easy. Now, why in the world would we front load a week like that? I have no idea. Makes no sense to me, even, given any sort of justification. I'm not going to call them out. I'm just using that as an example. So there's still people who forget this principle. So let's look at the history first. So if you go back, 1960s, Bill Bowerman, University of Oregon track coach, famous, also helped start Nike, etc., etc. Wonderful story. What he found is that up until that point, you generally had athletes who would go hard multiple times in a row. So you had Roger Bannister and Fran Stanfill, as I outlined in the history video I did last week. If you look at him, he did 5 days a week or 4 to 5 days of 400 meter intervals, essentially. It varied a little bit, but 400 meters hard at near mile pace or near mile goal pace. If you looked at Zatopek in the 60s, who won the 5K, 10K, and marathon in the same Olympics, guess what he was doing every day? 400s and 200s. Now they varied a little bit in terms of the speed. Sometimes he'd have like a lighter tempo and a fast tempo, but there were still hard day after hard day after hard day after hard day. Even Arthur Lydiard, the guy who changed training, who Bowerman went and visited and, got heavily influenced by. Arthur Lydiard's original training schedules had 5 days a week of hard interval training during the sharpening and co-coordination phase, which was the latter part of the season. Lydiard's later schedules didn't have 5 days a week of intervals. Guess what it did? It had 3 days a week. Hard, easy, hard, easy, hard, then long run, etc. Bowerman in the 60s figured out essentially the growth equation. Stress plus rest equals growth. We've got to balance that equation out. And while we might be doing less total days or volume of intensity, we're going to improve more. As I said, revolutionary at the time. A huge jump. It modernized training because up until that point, people thought, we've got to cram as much hard work essentially in as we can get. Even Lydiard, who said, hey, we need a lot of easy or moderate work, when it came to getting fast and peaking, he said, cram as much hard work as we can get. Bowerman changed the game. And what we saw from the 1960s and 70s and in some of the research and literature, we started to see the introduction of theories of training adaptation which validated Bowerman. Essentially, ideas like supercompensation, which simply say when we stress an organism, at first it gets a little worse. As we recover, repair, get better. But as we have recovery in there, we supercompensate. We get better than we were before. Or the fitness fatigue model, similar to supercompensation, but essentially says as the workout comes around, what happens? We gain a little bit of fitness, but fatigue gets in the way. So to express that fitness, we need to have the recovery so that our fitness is going up, but we've got the recovery so the fatigue dissipates so we can express the fitness we have. There's all sorts of models around training adaptation which essentially get to and validate the same point that Bowerman had, which is we have to balance stress and recovery, hard and easy. Hard intervals or hard tempos with easy or steady runs. And when we do that, we're better off. Simple, right? Well, since then we've added, let's say, nuance. What we now know is that there are different types of fatigue. So we have things like neural fatigue. So if I go out and I do a couple short sprints, we're talking, 40 to 60 meters. Couple of them, long recovery, not high volume. The next day, what happens? Well, if I haven't done it very long, I'm going to get sore, right? From some muscle tears, etc. But even if I'm adapted to it, neurally, I won't often be able to produce as much force because I'm still recovering from that. It's a high neural demand, high central nervous system. Had to recruit a crap ton of fast twitch fibers, which was taxing. Even if my muscles are adapted and there's not many tears or damage or anything like that, I still feel it neurally the next day, maybe even the next day. We look at fatigue from things like fueling. So if I go out and run a very long run or a long, hard tempo or marathon pace run, what happens? We get glycogen depletion in the muscles and they're generally not restored the next day. So when we go run again, we're running on a little bit less glycogen, which if we go long enough pushes us down into fatigue again. We have byproduct-based fatigue. A lot of times you hear lactic acid, not really the thing that causes it, but hydrogen ions and other byproducts that develop in the muscle as we do something hard, they get in there and they dissipate pretty quickly, often within minutes or multiple minutes of finishing. But the fatiguing effects are still there days later. Not lactate being around. It's not. It's out of your body, and depending if you exercise or not, 15 to 30 minutes, right? Even if you just lie there, it'll be gone in 30 minutes. It'll be metabolized. But what we see is some of the effects of those byproducts altering, what's going on in the muscle, enzymatic damage, all that stuff. Some of those effects linger for days, depending on how acidic the environment was that you created with hydrogen ions and other things like that. Okay, we won't go into too far into the physiology. That's not the point. But the point is we have these different kinds of fatigue. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, muscle damage. So what muscle damage is we often have micro tears in the muscle that are normal, but our body has to go in there and repair those and build over it. It's like, coming in and repairing the street and putting some, pavement down or whatever have you to fix the pothole. We've got to do that. And that takes time. Now, all of that being said, what we now know is that all of those, depending on the stimulus or stress, have different time horizons. So I'm going to put up a chart by Jan Albrecht, a scientist and swimming coach who kind of gave us a little bit of idea of this, but if we're honest, we don't have the best idea on time horizons. A, because they're so individual, depending on the athlete and the training status, and B, because it's really freaking hard to measure. So these are best guesses, Okay. But what I want you to get and to understand is that for each athlete and each workout type, the time horizon can change. Okay. And years ago, I tried to get at this by having my athletes actually fill out questionnaires and surveys and college athletes. And what I was looking for is not at each of these individual fatigue levels, although we measured some of it, by questionnaire. But what I was looking at is how long did it take them to get out of the hole to feel good again? And what you tended to see is depending on the workout, they started to have patterns, right? And those patterns were individual. So after, mile repeats, it might take them, 2 days to start feeling good. After hill sprints, they felt pretty good after, a day, for example. After a long run, if they're an 800 meter runner, it took them 3 days to get back to normal. Okay. And then the other factor that I think is really important here is when I say get back to normal, we're not training during the easy. We're not taking it off. We're still doing something. And sometimes we're doing something relatively moderate. Or as I'll come to tell you later, we're doing something hard in a different direction. And in addition to that, we're not just not taking it off. When we talk about getting back to normal, what we mean is alleviating enough fatigue so we can do the next workout and adapt to it positively. That doesn't mean eliminating all fatigue. So think of, again, fitness fatigue model. We work out, fitness goes up. After a little bit, fatigue goes up too. We have to wait for the fatigue to dissipate. We're not expecting it to go all the way down to zero, right? Because then the time horizon to get down to zero, our fitness would start to tail off. So instead, we're waiting for it to get to appropriate level that we've deemed as a coach where we can do the next workout successfully and not dig a hole. Okay? And then one other key part in this hard-easy nuance is it's not just hard and easy. So we don't just have different kinds of fatigue, we have different stressors, right? I can make 400 meter repeats easy if I go slow enough and modulate the recovery. I can make it moderately easy, moderately hard, very hard, go see God day hard, right? Depending on how I modulate the recovery, the speed, the interval length, the sets, the reps, all of that stuff. And I think this is really important because just because we do a workout, quote unquote workout, we can make it easy. And this was the genius of a Hungarian coach called Mihaly Igloy. This is also what swimmers often do. Swimmers don't do easy runs, right? They still do intervals, but they're relatively controlled. This is what Igloy did. He did a bunch of short intervals, and on hard days, they were often very hard and very long in terms of volume. But on easy days, they were more of what he called fresh speed, which was like feel good, no tension. And he'd modulate the workout so it was, you're still running somewhat fast because you're doing hundreds and 200s and 150s and 250s and 300s and all these intervals. But he'd modulate the pace and the recovery so it wasn't dipping into that kind of overall stress level. So it's not just go do intervals or a hard workout and then take an easy run, although that can be applied. It's also, you can mix and match the intensities besides just hard and easy. So let me give you a couple examples. I love some moderate workouts to prep people for races or moderate workouts to kind of fill the gap between bigger workouts where I get a little extra recovery. So think of it like this. If I have a Monday really hard workout and then on Saturday I'm going to do a long run with some intensity in it, like a progression run or a tempo run in the middle, then that Thursday I might say, man, I don't want to go 3 hard workouts this week. I might say, you know what, we're going to do some cruise 200s. We're going to go down the track. We're going to do 10 to 16 by 200 with 200 jog. We're going to start at 5K or 3K pace and work down a mile pace. Not that hard. Athletes walk away feeling pretty good. Another example is the Canova speed variations, where he'd say, hey, during your 8 mile or 9 mile run, I want you to do 10 by 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Just pick up the pace. Or alternatively, I might add some strides or some even some accelerations or some light sprint work as a moderate day if they're adapted to it. Which gets us to the last point I want to make on this hard easy conundrum. Is because, as I said, we have these different levels of fatigue or different kinds of fatigue. What happens is we can play around with that to a degree. So what does that mean? So for example, I can go in different directions with my workouts, just kind of like what I showed on the moderate 200 sandwich in between the hard intervals and the longer stuff. So think of it like this. I could do hill sprints, a high neural demand, so high neural fatigue, on a Monday, and then come back even Tuesday or perhaps Wednesday and do some sort of threshold work, which wouldn't be so high neural demanding, but more of a kind of moderate to moderately high metabolic or high-end aerobic demand. So something like 2 by 15 minutes at threshold with a couple minutes in between, or 3 by 10 minutes, or 6 by mile, or 5 by mile at threshold with a minute jog in between. Threshold meaning pace you could last for about an hour, give or take. There's some more specificity, but that does it for most people. Okay, why could I stack those closer together? Because as long as I'm adapted, that high neural stress, if I go into the threshold workout a little bit neural fatigued, not a big deal. Now, if I did the hill sprints and then did the day after, I did some hard 200s or 300s at 800 pace, I'd feel that high neural demand. I wouldn't be able to get as much quality out of that 200 or 300 meter session at 800 pace. Same if I did a really long run with some intensity in there that depleted my glycogen, that forced me to recruit fast twitch fibers to utilize their fuel at the end because I'm running out of fuel and running out of fibers to use because it's so long. And then if I came back a couple days later and did something short and fast, guess what? Those fast twitch fibers weren't going to be recovered, right? So that kind of fatigue interferes with things, right? Makes sense? But on the flip side, I could combine, some threshold with, some cruise 200s very close together. And those fatigues wouldn't have as much interactive effect. Again, we could get really complicated really quick, but the idea is to realize there's nuance here. And it's not just hard, easy. It could be hard, easy, moderate, easy, hard, easy, moderate, hard, easy, whatever. Okay, the idea is we have to balance the equation, but it's not like we just have two things to balance it with. Hard and easy. We have all these variations. And as a coach, your job is to understand and explore how to do that. We'll go into that a lot more in future episodes. Okay, so let's bring this all back around. The basic idea is this. We need to balance stress and rest, or stress and recovery. And if we don't, we dig ourselves a hole. Are there some times where we intentionally, significantly imbalance things? Absolutely. Renato Canova, famed coach, calls it special blocks. A short period maybe of a day, sometimes 2 workouts in a day or a couple days where, he hits it harder than he normally would, kind of go to the well a couple times or close. But then there's lots of recovery afterwards to rebalance the equation. But what doesn't work is if we violate this principle of hard and easy with the nuance we, outlined, if we violate this consistently, the more you withdraw from the bank, the more recovery or easy work you have to allow that bank to replenish. And that applies to the micro on the couple day or week schedule and the macro. right? From weeks to months on end. Occasionally imbalance, but we've got to repay the debts. So, whenever you see programs that go back to back hard, realize that I can count on one hand the amount of times I would assign back to back hard for an elite level athlete. Okay? Sometimes in the same day, special block, but even those are super rare. If you're just getting started, my suggestion, or even if you're an amateur or even well trained, generally instead of Bowerman's hard and easy, generally what you see in modern training is hard and then 2 days easy and hard again. And then, depending on the schedule and time frame, maybe easy and then longer, which counts as a moderately hard or hard, right? So generally there's 2 days between hard workouts, sometimes one, but kind of varies there. So the point is, don't get lost training like we didn't learn this in the 1960s. Don't go back to how Zatopek did it. Learn from him. Don't go back to Lydiard's original training schedules. Learn from him as he did, from conversing with others and experimenting and talking with Bowerman. So that's what we got here. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, subscribe. It means a lot. I'm just trying to provide good information. That's it. I've got a lifetime of experience of coaching high-level elite athletes, Olympians, people top 10 in the world. Still work with some now. I was a high-level runner, exercise physiologist. I just love endurance sport. So my goal is to share good quality shit. That's it. If you want to support my work, the best way to do so is pretty simple. It's to buy my book. This is my most recent one. Okay? It is coming out soon, but if you order today, you get special bonuses, including my 100-page coaching cheat sheet guide, which is essentially the guide I wrote for myself. It includes all the stuff we talked about today, workouts, how to vary them, modify them, hard, easy, stimulus, adaptation, goes deep on psychology. That's the bonus book. And then in this book here, you get how to perform when it matters most, how to deal with underperformance in sport, but also burnout in life, how to not choke, and, the power and magic of belonging to performance. So this is my book on kind of the psychology of performance as a team and individual. So I hope you check it out. Links are wherever the links are, bio, up here, around here. Thanks everybody for watching and listening.